So we're here at the top of Jones Hill Wood, which is the wood that inspired Roald Dahl to write Fantastic Mr. Fox, and it's right in the pathway of the proposed HS2 railway, and it's at the very summit of the viaduct that's going to go across the vale between Wendover and Great Missenden. And we have a community here of protectors who are fighting that decision.
I'm a local, I live not far from here, and I'm heartbroken about what's going on here. It's just beautiful to be here. And I'm very grateful for the protectors, how brave they are, how much courage they have, because I know how violent the bailiffs can get, which is really frightening. And I'm not sure if I could be here when they come.
Exile organised a walk from Birmingham to Euston along the line to see forests that were going to be felled and see the forests that had been felled, and to speak to the locals along the route, which none of them want the train, by the way.
What do you do when you're not here in the woods? What's your day job?
So my day job in the inside world is a head chef in an office building, catering for the financial district in Bristol.
I've worked in the ancient woodlands of the Chilterns all my life, and this is going to be a national tragedy which is at the moment being completely unrecognised. We live in a democracy, but you wouldn't think so. This is going completely unrecorded by the mainstream media, which is why I'm here to support these brave, mostly youngsters, who are climbing and camping in the trees to do their very best to protect our wonderful ancient woodlands and the Chiltern landscape for future generations. Ancient woodland is irreplaceable. This woodland, I anticipate, has been here well over 1,000 years. They might say that they can replant saplings and create another woodland. Anyone can create a woodland. You can't recreate the flora and fauna, and the one thing you will never replace is the archaeology that you're destroying in doing what is going on in Jones Hill Wood and woodlands all along the HS2 route.
They're taking away these beautiful ecosystems that support thousands of species individually as a tree. Each tree can support thousands of individual species, and they're replacing them with single species, single row, and then letting those saplings die before they even develop. You can't replace a 100-year-old tree with a brand new sapling, and especially if you're not going to water it.
My name's Gemma. I'm from High Wycombe, which is a town about 10 miles from here, and I come here a couple of times a week to support the camp. To my mind, direct action is what people do when they're not being listened to, when all other avenues have not been successful. For me, HS2 is always been a terrible idea. I think people in charge know it's a terrible idea. I think it's corrupt. I think it's going to lose over 106 ancient woodland. It's absolutely devastating to see just how much biodiversity will be lost. We just can't afford it at this time when we're facing climate breakdown. It just feels like we're on the edge of really the world will be a diminished place for my children.
We were sitting in camp one day, and it was about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. We were just drinking coffee, having a chat, and there was suddenly this invasion of orange suits from HS2, carrots as we call them. And there must have been around 25 people came into the woods that day, and they claimed to be a group of ecologists, but I'll be honest with you, I mean, from knowing ecologists, from knowing people that work in the natural environment, these guys came in and they were young, and I don't want to say that young people are inexperienced, but most of them looked no older than about 20, 21. And they came in, they had one video camera, one iPad and one iPhone between them, a tape measure, and they literally measured one tree, pointed the camera at a tree, put some stuff into their iPad, and that was it. They called that the Ecological Survey of Jones's Woods. If you read the mitigation that HS2 talk about, and especially with the bat licences and the bird licences for nesting season, they're supposed to climb the trees. They're supposed to mark the trees from 1 to 3. They're supposed to actually rate these trees of how likely there is a bat roost or a bat nest or a bird's nest in it. Without climbing these trees, you can't tell. We've had our own independent wildlife experts come into these woods, and they've recorded song thrush, badger, foxes, muntjac deer, gliss, about 5 or 6 different species of native bird. We know we've got 2 species of bat here, and from what we witnessed, they weren't interested in what was here. They were ticking a box.
I've been writing to my MP, Greg Smith, for some time now. But I do know he is against HS2, and he has been asking questions, of the cabinet. But I know lots of people have been writing to him, so it just doesn't seem he's able to get anywhere with his questions. There's a part like near Aylesbury by Fairford Leys, and HS2 are going right through there, and it is an area of countryside that's easily accessible to residents from Aylesbury. So residents are going to really lose out.
There are no stops between London and Birmingham. It only benefits people who are travelling internationally. It's really just a shuttle service between Birmingham Airport and London Heathrow, when actually what we need is to invest in proper local services. At a time when we're not going to be carbon neutral for, well, I don't know when, maybe 2050, but maybe beyond then, we need to not be thinking of a project which won't be carbon neutral for 100 years, which is what HS2 is. HS2 has employed an organisation called National Eviction Team. It's worth finding out who they are. They have been abusing protesters who are innocently protecting our lives. One of the things that they do when they're trying to get people away from a place where HS2 wants to saw down trees is to attack the protesters and hit them and beat them up in the places where they know that it will cause the most hurt. And then the protesters are not arrested, because if they're arrested they go to court. Then there's public opinion on their side. There are lots of strategies used by the people who are pushing this thing through in order to make sure that it is not stopped.
I'm a retired probation officer, and I have been part of the HS2 campaign for this year, so it's coming up to about 7 months. I generally spend 2 to 3 weeks here and then go home to my family for a week or 2. I am not as strong and brave and hardy as some of the people on this campaign who stay here day in and day out continuously. I need R&R more than they do. 54 years old. I have osteoporosis. I'm not very strong, but there are other roles that you can do. There is a women's group called Women Against High Speed. Let me show you. You can see. We do outreach, and we do what we call ground crew. We want men just as much as we want women to join our group. Another role that play is arrestee support, which is a really important role. I had the honour of being arrestee support for somebody that was arrested this week. Very unfair arrest. She was paddling around in the river, and I went into the camp standing on the bank. There was a couple of guys in a tree that was being threatened to be cut down. The batting licence had expired. It was illegal for that tree to be felled, so 2 people had climbed up it. This girl was just in the river wading around, talking to the people in the trees, saying how thank you for what you've done, what you're doing. And the police just suddenly arrived. There was about 20 of them. They formed a line in front of the riverbank. I was standing talking to the police, asking them about the cognitive dissonance that I believe a lot of them have, because I don't believe they want to be doing what they're doing. And then my friend came up to the riverbank and called the police and said, "What are you doing here?" And they said, "We're here to prevent crime." And she assumed it was about the 2 people in the tree. They never once said to her anything about her being in the river being a crime. The police tackled her to the ground headfirst in the mud in a nettle bush, and they had got her arms pinned right up behind her and carried her upside down, handcuffed to the van. You can clearly hear in the video her saying that, she would walk, and she did, she ran because she didn't know what was going on, and she was shocked, and she was trying to explain, but they weren't prepared to listen. then she was put in the van and held in the police station for 12 hours. They released her without interview, but they did charge her because apparently the river belonged to HS2, so she was committing aggravated trespass. I didn't know that the river belonged to HS2, if it even does, until that very moment. She was not told, she was not asked to leave. It was not her intention to be arrested at all. We had plans that afternoon to do a little crochet circle, and yeah, it was brutal. I've got photographs that I've taken for evidence of marks on her back. They kneed her in the back when she was on the floor, and of all around her wrists where the handcuffs were pulled tight. She was really battered, and yeah, not a nice experience. Fortunately, at 11 o'clock that night, some local people contacted me and said, when you get this girl out of the cells, whatever time it is, come to our house, have a bath, have something to eat, go to bed, do whatever you want to. So we managed to do that, which was really good for this girl to actually be able to sit somewhere and go through the emotions of having just been arrested, the disbelief, the horror, the anger, the sadness. Just go through, talk about it until she didn't want to talk about it anymore, and actually get it out of her system. Hideous bail conditions, and we believe that's what the arrest was for, was so that they could get her bailed away from HS2 sites, which is what they're doing. So what does that mean? So what they do, often they will arrest you for something that is really tiny and, you know, not really worth an arrest, but then they give you bail conditions. So what happens is they tell you that you can or can't do certain things before your court appearance. Now bear in mind that this girl has never been arrested. She's not even known on this campaign, had no intention of being arrested, and she got bail conditions in which she is not allowed to communicate to HS2 workers, go 50 metres within an HS2 site, not be on any public footpath or highway or anything that has got anything to do with HS2. I mean, the solicitors are going to be doing something about those bail conditions because they were completely out of proportion to what happened.
I'm Joanna, and I've lived here for nearly 40 years. We just cannot understand that this being an area of outstanding natural beauty, supposedly protected by government legislation, is going to be bulldozed away to make way for a train that more and more people just don't want to see done, especially in the light of the COVID-19 crisis and the amount of money that's going to cost. It's really been shown through the COVID, you know, people going on their bicycles, people walking. They say, what about the sign? What does this mean? And I say, well, this is where the HS2 train is going. And they go, really? How can this beautiful view be carved up like that? And so many people have said that. And, you know, on the one hand, we talk about the healing of nature on people, and then on the other hand, they're destroying it. Over the years, we've attended meetings, petitions. My mother went to the House of Commons. She went to the Select Committee with her petition. I put one through as well, and all we got was, those rich people in their mansions with their big gardens, and we're certainly not in that category at all. We tried to, if you like, play by the book, and just wasn't, you know, everything we did just wasn't listened to, and, you know, sadly it's had to come to this. I think the guys in the camp are really good. They're really wanting to put things out so people can see what actually is going on with the destruction of hedgerows and the effect on animals and the bats and things that have just been ignored over the last 10 years. They are very brave indeed, putting their lives on the line to save what we take for granted.
I'm in a beech tree. It's well over 100 years old, as is most of the wood. I'm about 55 feet above the ground.
Blimey, you're quite high up.
Hope none of your viewers have vertigo.
Blimey.
HS2 say they're mitigating, and it's the greenest engineering projects in in the world. They're planting twice as many trees as they're destroying, but they're not replacing like for like.
You can't replace a 100-year-old tree.
No, exactly. And so the farm we're adjacent to, which is the Bunce farm, you'll see on the map, the Bunce farm, one of the farmers in the book, he's going to lose one of his barley fields, which is adjacent to the wood, in the next few weeks and months, and they're going to plant saplings, and then they'll hand him back the field, and he has to maintain and manage them, and that's their mitigation. So it puts a burden on him as a farmer. He's got no financial stake in it. And many of the saplings that have already been planted along the way in mitigation have died. Some people say half of them have died.